The house stood glowing against the chill of late fall. Eunice Brennan's colonial home looked more like something prepared for a magazine shoot than a family gathering. Lights lined the trim, candles flickered in the windows, and every corner seemed polished to perfection. I stepped from the car, the air sharp against my face, autumn leaves scraping along the driveway. It was the kind of picture-perfect scene people longed for. Yet the closer I got to the front door, the more my chest tightened. The valet reached for my coat, and I let it slide from my shoulders. I forced a smile, nodding politely as though I hadn't been running through the same mental preparation all day. Keep your head high. Remember what they don't know. The life you've built outside these walls is yours, untouched by them. That thought steadied me, but dread still lingered at the edge of every breath. Tonight wasn't going to be kind. Inside, the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume wrapped around me. Guests mingled in curated clusters, laughter echoing across the high ceilings. I walked slowly, letting the sounds blur into background noise until I noticed the display by the door. The seating chart, every name neatly written in calligraphy, each placement carefully chosen. My eyes scanned the list until I saw it. Marla, guest. No Donahue, no family tie. Just a vague label, as if I were a stranger tagging along. My card was tucked near the bottom corner of the board, directing me to a small table set right beside the service door. A place meant for the forgotten, the inconvenient. The spot where servers shuffled in and out carrying trays, barely looking up. It wasn't just a seat, it was a statement. I thought back to childhood Thanksgivings when I was 25 and still banished to the kids' table. Old enough to vote, old enough to pay rent, but not old enough to belong. I pressed my fingers against the edge of the card, then quietly turned it face down. A small rebellion, one no one would notice. But it was mine. I drew a deep breath and moved toward the table, aware of the servers passing close by, aware of the sting already settling under my skin. Then I heard it, Lyle's voice, cutting through the clatter of glasses. No wonder you're still single at 37. His words rang out clear enough for every guest in the room to hear. He raised his glass as though making a toast, smiling wide. A ripple of laughter followed. Some chuckled politely, others smirked with satisfaction. A few looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to step in. My chest burned. I kept my face still, a mask of calm, but inside I could feel the weight of each chuckle, each a reminder of how easily cruelty could pass for humor when aimed at me. I studied the room in silence, cataloging who laughed, who stayed silent. Their reactions told me more than their words ever could. And Lyle, he wasn't joking. That was a strike, a public declaration meant to humiliate. He'd been doing it my whole life. Tonight, he sharpened the blade. Then, as if the scene hadn't cut deep enough, Eunice appeared. My mother floated into the circle like she owned the air. Perfect posture, perfect hair, the embodiment of grace. Her smile was warm enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. She touched my arm lightly, the way a hostess might with a guest. At least you made an effort tonight, she said, her voice silk. The room chuckled again, softer this time, but the sting burrowed deeper. Everyone heard it, not a compliment, but a reminder that I usually fell short. I swallowed hard, and instead of snapping back, I answered simply, "Thank you." My tone even, my face unshaken. Inside, though, the thought pulsed sharp and bitter. Family can be the first to betray you. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. I sat down at the edge table, the service door swinging open and shut beside me. A cousin leaned in briefly, whispering, "Don't mind him." The words landed heavy. They meant well, maybe, but to me it sounded like dismissal. Don't mind him. As if I should just keep swallowing it. I let my eyes wander across the room instead. The MC tapped the microphone, rehearsing. A large projection screen flickered with the words, "Our family through the years." At every table, programs were neatly printed, lined up with precision. My gaze traveled to the head table, where an empty chair sat marked only with the word family. That chair, more than my placement, told the story. An anchor of absence. My hand gripped the fork, metal pressing into my palm. For a moment, I imagined standing, cutting through the room with words sharp enough to draw blood, but I let the fork fall back to the table. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. If I lashed out now, I'd be feeding their theater. I'd become the story they wanted. Instead, I waited. I told myself, patience. In America, silence can be louder than shouting. Sometimes the smartest move is letting them believe they've won. The MC's microphone popped suddenly, jolting the room. The lights dimmed. Eunice signaled to the staff, graceful as ever, while the screen brightened. Across it stretched the title, Our Family Through the Years. I leaned back, steadying myself, my hands curled beneath the table, knuckles white, and my final thought before the first slide appeared was simple, bitter, certain. I already know what it feels like to be edited out. The room darkened as the MC cleared his throat and announced a tribute to family history. The words seemed harmless, even sentimental, but my stomach tightened. A projector flickered to life, filling the screen with smiling faces from vacations, holidays, milestones. At first glance, it was what you'd expect, warm snapshots of years gone by. Yet something gnawed at me. The longer I watched, the sharper the edge became. Photo after photo slid across the screen. Christmas mornings, birthday dinners, beach trips. I remembered them all. I remembered the smell of pine needles, the laughter in the kitchen, the salt air tangling my hair on the shoreline. I remembered standing behind the camera, setting the table, wrapping the presents. But on the screen, I wasn't there. Faces filled the frame. Siblings, cousins, parents. But not me. Cropped out, or maybe never included in the first place. A whisper rose behind me. Someone noticed. A guest leaned toward another, murmuring something they thought I couldn't hear. Others pretended not to notice at all, eyes fixed forward, smiles frozen. My throat tightened as if the room itself conspired to choke me. It felt like I was watching my life vanish in real time. Erased. As though my existence could be trimmed out with scissors, leaving no trace but the echo in my own memory. Then, as if on cue, Lyle stood. His voice carried over the soft hum of the projector. "That was the Christmas I organized," he said, gesturing at an image of stockings by the fireplace. Laughter trickled. I stared at the screen, knowing full well I had baked every cookie that year, strung the lights, placed those very stockings. Slide after slide, he went on. That was the year Mom had to do it all because Marla was busy elsewhere. His tone was casual, convincing, a performance. Heads nodded, chuckles rippled. The lie was dressed as truth, and no one corrected it. I bit down on the inside of my lip until I tasted iron. Each false claim landed like a nail hammered into wood, sealing my absence not just from the screen but from their memory. This wasn't simple forgetting, it was rewriting. Erasure sharpened into replacement. My eyes scanned the room. Who smiled a little too eagerly at his story? Who leaned forward, buying every word? I kept count. It wasn't about being left out anymore. It was about being buried under their version of events. Not a single voice rose to defend me. Not from my cousins, not from uncles who had been there, who knew. Their glances slid past me, awkward, hesitant, unwilling to cut through the comfort of the performance. Silence became a character of its own in that room. Heavy, loud, betrayal wrapped in stillness. Sometimes silence is the loudest agreement. That truth rang in my head as I sat there, hands folded, back straight. I knew then I would never be rescued in this room. Comfort would always outweigh truth, complicity would always win over conflict. The bitterness settled into something colder, clearer. If they wouldn't speak, I would. Not tonight. Not in this hall where every word would be twisted against me, but in my own time, on my own stage. I steadied my breath. I knew what they wanted, an outburst, a flash of anger they could point to as proof that I was unstable, dramatic, the family embarrassment. But I refused to hand it to them. My silence became sharper than any retort. I memorized the details. Which slides skipped me, which stories were twisted, who nodded, who smiled. Evidence, ammunition. I sipped from my glass of water, hands steady though my knuckles pressed white beneath the tablecloth. Inside, I repeated a truth to myself. History is written by those who hold the pen. Tonight, Lyle held the mic. But pens break. Truth outlives performance. In that moment, I thought of every time I'd seen this play out. Not just in my family, but in this country. People erasing inconvenient truths, rewriting for their own comfort. Older viewers would understand. Memory itself can be weaponized. I felt it in my bones. I reminded myself, this was not the end. This was documentation of cruelty. Every omission, every twist, every silence was being filed away. My silence was not surrender. It was strategy. I was storing every slight like dry wood waiting for the spark. The slideshow rolled on, image after image without me. Then it ended. Applause broke out, polite and warm. Eunice stood near the screen, smiling with pride at the picture of her family shining above her head. A family where I did not exist. My chest clenched so tight it hurt. Still, my face stayed calm, a mask no one could crack. And the thought settled like stone inside me. If they can erase me from the past, what will they try to erase next? The applause for the slideshow still rang in the room, but for me, it had already faded into something else, a hollow echo of laughter that didn't belong to this night. The faces around me blurred for a moment as I sat frozen, my mind tugged somewhere else. That sensation of being erased, of watching others smile at a history where I was cut out, it wasn't new. My body recognized it before my thoughts did. The sharp pull in my chest, the tightening in my throat, it dragged me into an old, unwelcome place. The smell of food in the air tonight, the clinking of silverware, even the chill from the drafty doorway near my chair. Those small details cracked open a door in my memory. I was back there again, a child sitting in silence while the noise of family carried on without me. My inner voice whispered, almost in disbelief, I've been here before. This isn't just tonight. This has been my place all along. I was 10 years old. Thanksgiving, I think. The main table glowed with light and laughter, adults leaning close, plates heaped with turkey and stuffing, the rhythm of voices rising and falling in waves. And then there was me, pushed to the corner on a metal folding chair that wobbled on the uneven floor. My plate arrived last, smaller portions, as though they had forgotten until someone finally scraped together leftovers. I remember holding the fork and wondering why the food tasted different when it came cold and late. The adults brushed it off with casual words. She's little, she can wait. A shrug, a joke, and back to their laughter. But to me, it was a declaration. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't priority. I wasn't central to the story. That moment carved a quiet ache into me. When you're invisible long enough, you start to think that's just your natural state. And it didn't stop there. It became a rhythm, a pattern so consistent, I mistook it for normal. Birthdays where my gifts were smaller, my name skipped in toasts. Achievements of mine brushed aside as coincidence, while Lyle's smallest efforts were praised like triumphs. Eunice, my mother, perfected the art of dismissal with a smile, never cruel on the surface, but always cutting me away from the center, subtle, steady, cumulative. And each time I tried to speak, I was met with that look, like my words were inconvenient, dangerous even. Silence was safer. Sitting here now at this table, I realized tonight wasn't a fresh betrayal. It wasn't even unique. It was simply the same wound in a sharper suit. Betrayal grown up, matured, polished enough to pass as family tradition. The present swam back into focus as I touched the rim of my glass. The cost of all those years of silence hit me hard. Silence had protected me, but it had also caged me. How many times had I swallowed the truth just to avoid being labeled the problem? How many times had I let them write me out while I sat politely, afraid to interrupt their story? There's a saying in this country, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But the silent one rusts. And that's what I had been doing, rusting quietly while they built their version of history. But tonight, something shifted. Memory stopped feeling like weakness. It became proof, a ledger, a living record that no slideshow could erase. Each omission, each twisted story, each quiet betrayal, I carried it all. And that meant I held the truth. I made a decision then. I wasn't here to lash out or to play the part of the villain they had written for me. I was here to watch, to gather, to hold their every word like evidence. Patience was no longer about survival. It was about precision. I knew women who came before me, women who had endured quietly for years before striking at the right moment. I was ready to do the same. I whispered inwardly, steady and sure. They don't realize I've been documenting them all along. Even when I was that little girl in the corner chair, I was taking notes. And now, every slight, every silence, every erasure fuels me. The memory of that empty folding chair fused with the empty space I held in tonight's slideshow, past and present locked together, and in that union came resolve. No more letting them write me out. No more rusting in silence. I glanced across the table at Lyle. His smug grin spread wide as he basked in the false narrative he had spun. The lights above caught the shine of his glass as he raised it to another guest. He looked at me as though I were still that child in the corner, too small, too insignificant to matter. I sipped slowly, never breaking eye contact. And in the quiet of my mind, I told him, "You have no idea. Memory isn't just remembering. Memory is resistance, and mine is sharper than you think." The clinking of silverware had barely settled when the MC excused himself from the microphone, signaling the end of the slideshow. Dinner plates were refreshed, waiters moved quietly between tables, and for a moment the evening seemed to exhale. But it wasn't ease. It was the pause before another wound. The air felt charged, the way a room shifts when everyone knows what's coming next. Toasts. My mother tapped her glass delicately, smiling toward Lyle as if no one else could possibly begin. It was always him. Her chosen son, her perfect heir. The order was ritualized. Who got the microphone, who was applauded, who was tolerated. I'd seen it all my life. We called it tradition, but what it really was, what it always had been, was hierarchy dressed up in manners. I tightened my grip on my napkin, bracing for the sting. In families like mine, power plays often came wrapped in sentiment. Americans like to pretend our families gather for love, but more often it's for theater. And then I already knew what role I'd been assigned tonight. Lyle stood easily, his glass raised with that practiced charm people mistake for leadership. He began with flattery, thanking our mother, admiring the guests, joking about family bonds, and then came the dagger, hidden behind a grin. Some people never quite figured out what family means, right, sis? The room chuckled softly, some laughing because they thought they should, others looking down into their plates to avoid meeting my eyes. I forced a polite smile, though I could feel the flush burning my cheeks. My throat tightened, but I swallowed it back. I wouldn't give him the pleasure of a visible reaction. It wasn't the insult itself. I'd survived worse. It was the way the audience carried it, their chuckles making his words heavier than they were. Insults in private wound, insults in public scar. He went on, painting himself as the one who bore responsibility, the one who carried burdens I had supposedly dropped. A protector, a savior. At my expense, I sat still, my face neutral, though my insides burned. He loved this, standing tall, rewriting family lore while I was expected to take it quietly. But arrogance is a dangerous thing, and arrogance tonight betrayed him. In his eagerness, he went further. "I mean, even in business," he said, raising his glass higher. "Remember that deal? Mom signed the papers like I told her to, so it was done before she even read it." For a heartbeat, the room stilled. The words hung there, sharp and heavy. I saw my mother's smile falter just slightly. Her eyes darted to the side before she quickly composed herself, nodding as if to wave it away. But I caught it. I heard it. And I knew exactly what it meant. It wasn't just a slip of words. It was confirmation. A deal done behind the curtain. Papers signed under his direction. My mother complicit without understanding. Exactly what I had long suspected but never had proof of. Tonight he gave it away freely, drunk on his own performance. The applause resumed quickly, guests eager to cover the silence. Eunice raised her glass, brushing over the slip as if it were nothing. But I noticed the unease in a few faces around the room. Conrad, sitting near the back, caught my eye. A flicker passed between us. He had heard it too. The kind of glance that says, "Did you hear what I just heard?" I didn't move. I didn't speak. Not yet. My silence wasn't weakness tonight, it was strategy. The confession was his, not mine. And every word, every witness became part of the record I was quietly building. I raised my own glass, steady, deliberate. I smiled, not the smile of surrender, but of someone cataloging every detail. I repeated the words in my head, committing them to memory. Mom signed the papers like I told her to. He thought it was a victory lap. He had no idea he had just delivered his own rope. There's a saying we all know. Give a man enough rope and he'll hang himself. Tonight I watched the knot form in his hands. The toast ended, the guests clapped, the evening marched on as though nothing had cracked. But for me, nothing would ever be the same. Because once you hear the truth slip out, you can't unhear it. After the clinking of glasses and the hollow applause faded, the room began to scatter into smaller groups. The toasts had done their work. People huddled in pairs, some gossiping near the bar, others pretending to admire the flower arrangements. I stayed seated a moment longer, letting the noise settle around me until I saw my chance. Lyle had drifted to the side of the room, basking in his own glow, entertaining a few cousins with another one of his half-true stories. I rose, steady and deliberate, weaving through the room until I stood near him. Not close enough to cause a scene, but close enough that he couldn't ignore me. My voice was even, calm. You've crossed a line tonight, and I want you to know I won't stay quiet anymore. He turned, a smirk tugging at his mouth as if I were a child tugging at his sleeve. That look, the one that said he wasn't threatened, only amused, was more cutting than any insult. Really, Marla? His laugh was sharp, loud enough to pull in the ears of a few nearby. You? Speak up, please. No one listens to you now, and no one ever did. The chuckle he let out rippled through the circle around him. Some cousins gave nervous laughs, not wanting to be caught on either side. Others turned away, feigning distraction. But the damage was done. He had turned my warning into entertainment. Again. The sting was there, but I refused to let it surface. I tightened my jaw, steadying my breath. Tears would have betrayed me. Anger would have fed him. Instead, I leaned in just enough so only he could hear the next part. If you keep twisting stories, I said quietly, my eyes locked on his, you'll find yourself tangled in your own lies. Don't test me. The shift wasn't in my tone, it was in my stare, in the calm certainty behind my words. He smirked again, but it faltered for a split second, a crack that only I caught. He wanted me loud, flailing, desperate. But all I gave him was composure. He stepped back, raising his glass as if dismissing me, returning his attention to the others. See what I mean? Always dramatic. His words floated out to the group, pulling another round of half-hearted chuckles. But his eyes flickered toward me once more before he turned fully away. Around us, the family performed its usual routine. Pretend not to notice, pretend not to care. Eunice sipped her wine as if she hadn't heard a thing, though I knew she had. The older cousins shifted uneasily, but kept their distance. And Conrad, he lingered near enough to show me he had seen, but not enough to intervene. In this family, appearances always outweighed truth. I stood there a moment longer, letting the silence settle over me. He had dismissed me, mocked me, turned me into the punchline again. But this time, I didn't walk away feeling beaten. No, something shifted. The confession he'd let slip during his toast replayed in my mind, word for word. He had already given me what I needed. The rope was in my hands now, and all I had to do was choose the moment to pull. Warnings are wasted on men like him. He thrived on brushing them off. But truth is heavier. Truth doesn't vanish because someone laughs over it. I straightened my back, set my glass down firmly, and reminded myself, I wasn't preparing for reconciliation. I was preparing for confrontation, and the next move wouldn't belong to me. The room had softened after the toasts, like a storm cloud that drifted just far enough for people to pretend the air was clear again. I tried to fold myself back into the crowd, to let the chatter and clinking glasses swallow me whole. If I could just make it to the end of the evening without another spectacle, maybe the sting from earlier would dull into something survivable. But I could feel eyes on me, not many, just enough to remind me that people noticed, even if they'd never say it aloud. A cousin's glance that lingered too long, an aunt pretending to smooth her napkin while sneaking a look in my direction. Eunice filled the silence with talk about the roast, about how perfectly it had been cooked, her tone too sweet, too polished, like she was trying to plaster over cracks in the wall. My gut told me it wasn't over. Lyle wasn't the type to leave things half-finished. Sometimes the worst storm comes after the quietest moment. And then, right on cue, he stood. Glass in hand, smile stretched just enough to look rehearsed. He hadn't been asked, but he didn't need permission. He took it anyway. Another toast, he said, louder than necessary, commanding the room. He started with charm, thanking our mother again, tossing compliments around like confetti. The crowd leaned in, indulging him. Then, as always, he shifted gears. You know, Marla has always been different, he said, pausing just long enough for the room to hold its breath. Always on the sidelines, never quite fitting in. It hit like a slap disguised as a pat on the back. A few guests laughed, not the cruel kind of laughter, but the polite, nervous chuckles people use when they don't want to stand out. I felt heat rise in my chest, but my face didn't flinch. I kept it still. Then he went further. He started to drag up half-true stories from years ago, shaping them into weapons. He told them I once ruined a family event that I'd left responsibilities behind for others to pick up. He painted me as unreliable, selfish. His words weren't just aimed at me, they were crafted to rewrite who I was in front of everyone listening. Each laugh that followed felt like a nail hammered into place. Some guests looked down at their plates. Others avoided my eyes altogether. No one stepped in. Not one. There's a saying I've always remembered. People will believe the loudest voice until they see the receipts. And Lyle was loud, louder than truth. Inside, I burned. My pulse raced, my fists pressed so tight against the fabric of my dress under the table that my knuckles ached. Every part of me wanted to stand up, to shout him down, to rip the mask off in front of them all. But I knew the trap. If I lashed out now, I'd confirm his version. I'd become the bitter, unstable sister he painted. So I swallowed it, not out of weakness, but out of choice. I reminded myself of all the times I'd been erased before, pushed to the edge of the frame. Tonight wasn't new, but tonight I would treat it differently. I raised my glass slowly, almost lazily, and brought it to my lips. I smiled faintly. Not too much, not defiant, just enough to signal that his attack hadn't pierced me. On the outside, I was unbothered. Inside, I was already writing down every word he said. Strength isn't about shouting louder, it's about outlasting the storm. And so I let him finish, let him bask in the applause he forced out of the room, let him believe he'd won. Because what he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that every word he spoke tonight wasn't breaking me. It was building my case. Piece by piece, shovel by shovel, he was digging the hole himself. The room moved on, laughter spilling into new conversations, the evening's rhythm resuming like nothing had happened. But my eyes stayed fixed on him. He thought he humiliated me. He thought I was shrinking smaller, smaller until I would vanish altogether. But what he didn't see was the steel in my silence. Final thought, he believes he humiliated me. He doesn't realize he just wrote his own downfall. After dinner broke into smaller clusters of chatter, the tension didn't leave. It just changed shape. It hung in the air like smoke, invisible but choking. People gathered in the living room, plates balanced on laps, glasses refilled again and again. But no matter where I moved, whispers followed me. I could see the tilt of a head, the way someone leaned closer, as if trading secrets that had my name stamped on them. And Lyle, he thrived in it. He floated from group to group, wearing that smug grin, whispering just loud enough for others to overhear. He fed on the silence of the room, using it as oxygen. I thought to myself, silence can protect you, but it can also be a prison. Each word he spread made my quiet feel heavier, like I was locking myself in from the inside. He didn't wait long before pressing harder. In the living room, with everyone pretending to relax, he started again. This time, he didn't even bother hiding behind jokes. He painted me as unstable, someone who couldn't manage her own life. He told them I leaned on others, that I was irresponsible with money. Then came the insinuations. A secret life. I apparently lived. No detail, just enough to spark curiosity. It wasn't ridicule anymore. It was character assassination. And worse, I could see the doubt flicker across some faces. People who had known me for decades looked as if they were weighing his words. That's the danger of a lie. It doesn't have to be detailed, it just has to be repeated. I clenched my jaw and thought, a lie repeated often enough begins to sound like truth until you cut it off cold. One cousin, trying to be gentle, leaned toward me and whispered, "Is it true? About the debt?" The humiliation was like a second blade. Not just the lie itself, but the fact that my own blood thought it might be true. Betrayal doesn't always come with a knife. Sometimes it's delivered through a rumor dressed in curiosity. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't let his story be the only one left standing. I was still burning inside when an unexpected hand brushed mine. A younger relative, barely out of college, slipped me something folded tight, a printout. On it, messages, screenshots of conversations, words I recognized as his. Lyle had been at this long before tonight, planting seeds, orchestrating whispers to ruin me. It wasn't just tonight's attack, it was a campaign. My breath caught. Proof, hard evidence, a smear campaign laid out in black and white. Someone had seen enough and they had chosen to give it to me. For the first time that night, I felt the weight shift. Truth has a strange way of resurfacing, even after being buried under lies. I slipped the paper into my pocket, my expression unchanged. Inside, the fire sharpened into something cooler, more focused. The strongest punch, I reminded myself, is the one they don't see coming. Lyle's weakness had always been his arrogance. He believed he could twist the room with nothing but his voice. He believed I would never push back. That belief was about to cost him. I straightened in my chair, my face calm, almost serene. No one could read the storm moving inside me. I thought of every erasure, every insult, every smear, and felt them fuse into something sharper than anger. Tonight, he revealed his cruelty. Tomorrow, I will reveal his lies. Across the room, Lyle laughed too loudly again, basking in the glow of his own performance. He didn't know what I now held in my pocket. He thought I was cornered. But I had just found the first crack in his fortress. The night had stretched long, but no one had left. Dessert plates sat empty, wine glasses refilled again and again. The air was thick, heavy with the residue of everything that had already been said. And then came the sound of silver striking glass. Eunice, regal as ever, called for one final toast. The entire family leaned in, bodies turning toward the center of the room. It was a ritual, almost holy in its formality. Everyone waiting to hear words that would close the night. And there stood Lyle, his chest puffed out, his smile wide. He believed he had won, that every whisper, every laugh at my expense had sealed the narrative. He thought I had been reduced to a shadow again, silent and irrelevant. But as he lifted his glass, I felt my spine straighten. Timing is everything. In chess, you don't reveal your queen until the board is ready. My silence all evening had been the preparation. This was the stage. The family wasn't just the audience. They were my jury. I placed my glass down carefully and rose. Before we close the night, there's something I need to say. The room went still. I reached into my pocket, unfolded the paper, and began to read. Word for word, Lyle's own messages, mocking me, instructing others to question my worth, plotting the smear campaign he'd been weaving for months. His handwriting of cruelty, his arrogance preserved in black and white. Gasps broke across the room. Whispers spread like fire. Eunice froze, eyes darting, not knowing whether to defend or deny. Some faces turned pale, others hardened with disgust. I held my tone steady. No yelling, no gloating. Just truth laid bare. This isn't revenge. This is survival. You all deserve to know how the stories about me really began. For a moment, power shifted. For the first time, silence worked in my favor. But Lyle wasn't one to crumble quietly. His face flushed red, his composure cracking. That's not real, he barked, fumbling in his jacket pocket. He pulled out a sheet of paper of his own, waving it high. You want evidence? Here's her own words, her lies about her marriage, about her career. She's been playing all of you. Eyes turned. Suspicion flickered. The room teetered on a knife's edge. I felt my chest seize. The paper he held was doctored, twisted, and for a split second, doubt touched even those closest to me. Lies are quicksand. They pull down even the people who know you best. My throat ached, the familiar sting of being disbelieved pressing down hard, but I didn't raise my voice. I breathed. And then I spoke, calm, deliberate. If you look closely, you'll see what doesn't add up. The dates, the formatting, the way the words don't match my voice. He's counting on shock to cover the cracks. And then, like a hand on my back, another voice rose, the same younger relative who had given me the proof earlier. I saw what he did. I saw how he planned this. Marla isn't lying. He is. The room shifted again. Questions flew at Lyle, not at me. His false paper trembled in his grip. I didn't press harder. I simply stood there, calm, unshaken. Reflection carried me. The loudest voice isn't the strongest. The calm one, the one that cuts precisely. That's the voice that survives. Lyle lost control. His smirk broke into a snarl. He shouted, spit flying, veins rising in his neck. You've always been nothing. Always. And in that moment, he exposed himself. Not me. His cruelty spilled raw into the open, and for once no laugh covered it. No silence excused it. His own arrogance had done the work I didn't need to finish. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply stood, still and steady, as the room's silence condemned him. Triumph hummed under my skin, but so did a hollow ache, because it should never have taken proof for them to see. Voices rose around me, arguments breaking out, sides being drawn, but I barely heard them. My voice, when it came, was quiet, cutting through the chaos. This isn't the end. There's one more truth you all need to hear. The room sat in a silence so heavy it pressed against my skin. After Lyle's shouting, after his unraveling, not a soul knew where to place their eyes. Some stared at the floor, others fiddled with their glasses. Eunice sat stiff as stone, lips pressed tight. And me, I stood there steady, though every muscle begged for rest. It struck me then, the hardest part of truth isn't speaking it. It's choosing the moment when it will matter most. Tonight had already broken open more wounds than I could count. Yet I knew one last truth had to be spoken. Not for them, but for me. I felt the fatigue in my bones, the ache of years of silence carried in my chest. Still, I drew breath and lifted my head. This was the moment. My calm after the storm wasn't relief. It was the eye of it. I need you all to hear something, I said, my voice low but firm. Something I've kept to myself, because I refuse to let it be tainted. Gasps scattered before I even spoke the words. And then I laid it bare. I got married quietly, without you, because peace mattered more to me than performance. The room jolted, eyes widened. A few mouths opened in disbelief, others in anger. Whispers cut through the air. I kept speaking. A wedding isn't about applause. It isn't about staging some perfect family photo. It's about building a life with someone who brings you peace. And peace meant not giving you power to ruin it. The gasps turned to ripples of outrage mixed with awe. How could you hide this from us? One aunt hissed. You betrayed the family, another spat. But there were other voices too, softer. Good for her, someone muttered from the back, finally choosing herself. I looked them all in the eye, each one who dared meet my gaze. You laughed when I was alone. You mocked me when I stayed silent. Did you truly think I would invite you to celebrate what you tried so hard to destroy? Their faces told the truth, some ashamed, some still too proud to flinch. And it stung me all over again that they could not bring themselves to celebrate my joy without turning it into a wound. Reflection cut deep inside me. Sometimes family isn't the people who share your name. It's the ones who share your joy. And tonight, I saw exactly who those were. But Lyle, always desperate for the last word, snapped. It's fake. Probably some scheme. Who would marry you anyway? He thought he had clawed back control, that his venom still held sway. I didn't argue. I simply lifted my hand, unfolded the certificate, laid down the photographs, and let them see. Witnesses, names, proof beyond denial. His smirk drained into silence. No outburst could cover the fact that he had nothing left. The room turned on him, not loudly, but with something worse. Cold dismissal. The kind of silence that makes a man invisible. And me? I felt no triumph, only release. The truth doesn't need to roar. It just stands there, undeniable, while lies collapse under their own weight. I let the papers rest on the table and stepped back. My voice softened. You all had the power to make me feel small. You took that chance again and again. But I don't live in that prison anymore. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about cutting the chain that kept me tied to their cruelty. So I turned, and there he was, my husband, waiting, steady, his hand out for mine. I took it without hesitation. Together, we walked past the table, past the shame and silence, and toward the door. Each step felt like freedom, though the ache stayed heavy in my chest. Some wounds never close, but I'd chosen peace, and that choice was mine alone. I paused once at the door. My eyes drifted to the chair my mother used to sit in, empty all these years. Yeah, I remembered every laugh at my expense, every silence when I needed her voice. They thought I'd always be alone. They never imagined I'd walk away whole. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the night. Not alone, never again alone.